Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's continue implementing our core module. We have stopped in the API service. We have done API service. So we have implemented API service. Now we have to mock our engine. I'm going to provide here some mock data for the sake of this tutorial. So under API, let's create here a new package. It's going to be called mock. And inside mock package, I'm going to add mock data. So these are the mock data. This approach is good. You can mock the data using JSON and convert the JSON accordingly. I have noticed some few typos here. Let's come back to the pagination product. I have done L, which is a typo, and inside the user DTO, so login response DTO, you should do here user instead of user DTO. So these are the mock data. And now we have to implement the API mock engine. I'm going to simulate the API calls. So this mock engine is going to be used in our testing. When you are going to test, we're not going to test with real data. Instead, we're going to test with mock data. So let's create the client that we would use, and it's going to be injected in the constructor. HTTP client, mock engine, and import. I'm going to do here engine, and we have to add the handler here. Request. First of all, we have to get the data from the request. And from the request, we need to access the path that we assign to a specific response. And the response is going to be, for example, list of products, or add or delete wish list, or for example, authentication. So this is the idea. I'm going to add a simple function that's going to prepare the request data. Under mock, I'm going to add a new file. It's going to be called helper. It's going to be an extension function on mock request handle scope. Let's call it prepare request data. Why I'm creating an extension? Because you can do it here, but it's the code is not going to be readable. So that's why I prefer to handle the request data separately in a new extension function. And it's going to take in parameter the request of type HTTP request data. And it will give us a data that we have to provide afterward. I would like to have in the data, for example, the URL, the method that we have used. For example, are we calling put or get or post in the request? The query, for example, the path, and another thing which is important, the form data, and the headers, if we have passed a token or not. Add here another Kotlin class, or it's going to be data class, mock engine, request data. We can use the URL, the method, query, the path, the form data, type parameters, the headers to check if we have, for example, the token or the bearer token. At the end of the day, it's going to serve mock engine request data, and we will use this data in the handler in order to do, if you will, a dynamic response for each API endpoint. The URL is going to be request an encoded path. For the method request, the method and value. Now for the query, which is a little bit tricky. So we can access the query from the URL, an accessor, which is parameters, and we can have entries, which is, I think it's the list of parameters, and we will join. Let's convert it to string, and the separator, it's going to be and it, and the key equal the value and first. All right. So for the path, the query, first of all, is now empty. Else, we're going to return the URL as it is because it's empty. And if the URL is not empty, we will do URL. So the query here, it's going to be the query. Now we should extract the raw body from the request. If it's a byte array, which is very important, or a byte array content. Byte array content actually is a common for form URL encoded request. Body, it's going to be string, request body. So we have to cast it to outgoing content. And we have said before that we have to extract the body from the request, which is a byte array content. And here we will do, because it's nullable to byte array, the decode to string. So now we have transformed the body to body string. And now we have to manually parse the URL encoded form body into the key value pairs. So this is what we're going to do here. construct the form data parameters and build. So we have calculated the body string. Gonna split with this separator in order to access the pair key value. Call here param. A single parameter is gonna have multiple equal special character. So what we have to do here is val parts. We're going to split with great. So interest audio is following along. So val parts equal params, and we're gonna split with the equal special character. And for the keys, I'm going to decode this value into UTF-8. And the value, we're going to take the first one, otherwise we're gonna append the rest, the key and value. I guess we have everything now, so let's return mock engine data. In the API mock engine, get the data, and the request is going to be request. Now we can set our API endpoints, or to simulate our API endpoints. The first case, if the data and the path, it's going to contain, for example, API products. So in this case, we have to simulate pagination products request. So we are trying to simulate the response by each API endpoint. I guess that it's time to define our specific mock request handler for products, for wish lists, and for authentication. Let's define the first one, which is product mock request handler. It's going to be a file, so function, and it's going to give us HTTP response data. Once we hit this mock API endpoint, we will return this response. What we have to convert to JSON, mock data, products pagination response. The status code OK, response headers as header. So let's come back to the API here. We're gonna call paginate product response, and we have to provide the response header, or the response headers. We can get the response headers from the list of application.json. So we're going to create here imputed property headers of content type 2 and content and application JSON and toString. And here we're gonna do response headers. If any API endpoint does not match what we're gonna do here, error, so the path that you have called not supported, for example. Under products mock requests, get product detail, and mock data sunglasses. For the other one, which is, let's do, for example, the search product or search suggestions, we need the data and we need the response headers. If the data method equal post, otherwise throw error unsupported method. Now, in case we have the correct method, we need to access the search query in order to make this response dynamic. And let's respond. I have provided here a helper function that's going to simulate the suggestions and the query, search query. And for the suggested product, it's going to take the product's pagination data. It's going to filter with the query that we're going to assign here. Just a simple simulation. And the status code, it's going to be OK. And headers. For the search products, you can copy this. Data and request and headers. So it's not post, it's going to return this error. And we have to get from the data the search request, otherwise it's going to be empty. And instead, we're going to do search pagination response, and we have to pass the query in parameter, OK, and headers. Let's do the authentication mock request handler login. So in parameter, we need to pass the data. Why, you might ask? Because we need to have the form data. First of all, let's check the method if it's equal to post, so we can proceed. Otherwise, unsupported error. Let's get the value of the email and password data and form data. As you can see now, it's reusable once we have done the implementation correctly, and password. So if the email equal, let's say, you can define here in the constant. So let's go to the constant and add test email or mock email, val mock password. All right, mock email, mock password, else section. So JSON, API response, and the data, it's going to be null. As we have done, I think, in Laravel, the most important thing here is the HTTP response unauthorized and the headers. Otherwise, return here the user data. I think it's a good thing actually to copy this, paste it here under the mock data. So for the register, it's going to be with the same manner. think it's full name. Password confirmation, we will do register response and full name. Come on, I need autocomplete right now. For the register response, it's going to be simply just a simple validation. If the email is not empty or all the fields are not empty and we have the same password confirmed or the password is confirmed, going to show the message registered. Otherwise, the data is going to be null and we have to return an API response and we are going to use it here. So it has to be okay here. This is a very dire mistake. We have to be careful. In this case, it has to be okay. The next one is authenticated. So we need to pass the same thing. So the actual token is going to be from the header or the bearer token. Token equal data and headers authorization. If the actual token equal bearer, and we're going to access the mock data because we are using it anyway. So otherwise, we will return a response. It has to be unauthorized response headers. Authentication user response has correct token equal false. On the other hand, if we have the correct token, so let's copy this. Instead, it's going to be true and HTTP OK. With the same logic, I'm going to do logout. So if we have a bearer token, and if the token equals, so we are allowed to make this request, basically. And I think it's called logout response, has correct token equal true, otherwise has the correct token equal false. And if we check the implementation, logout response, if we have correct token, we're just gonna use true or false. Just for readability purposes, I decide to do this. So we are done here with the authentication. The last mock request handler should be the wishlist. To toggle wishlist, so function access data, the response. So first of all, we need to get the product that we want to toggle, or the product's ID. It's going to be from the data path and substring. All right, there is a function that's called substring after last. It's going to access directly the last element to long or null. And we need to get the bearer token. So I'm not going to repeat myself here. I'm going to simulate if the user is allowed to make this request or not. So now let's focus on how to simulate toggling wishlist, updated wishlist. It's going to be mock data wishlist filter with products ID from the request. Let's get the wishlist item ID. If the updated wishlist or the size of the updated wishlist is less than the size of the original wishlist, in other words, we are deleting the item, and otherwise we are adding the item. Finally, we will respond with API response, and the data, it's going to be wishlist DTO and wishlist item ID equal wishlist item ID. I guess that we're not going to use the products ID here. I have updated the wishlist response DTO, not going to use the products ID. Hopefully it's not going to affect our mappers. Let's come back to the wishlist request. It will be if we have -1, so it means that it's not in wishlist, in other words, false. So in wishlist equal wishlist item ID different than -1. Otherwise, it's going to be false. And wishlist item ID, it's going to be the wishlist item ID that we have calculated before. And that's pretty much it for the how to simulate a little bit or to make it a little bit dynamic, this response request. The last one, to get entire item, this is very straightforward. For the data, it's going to be mock data, user, and wishlist. So now let's fill our API engine with the needed API endpoints. So I'm not going to enter in detail how to do it. It's just a matter of filling the same API endpoints in Laravel. So I'm going to provide this directly just for readability purposes. So in helper, I'm going to create a new function to test our route that matches a route. It's going to be with this regular expression. We will return and matches the regular expressions. The error should be gone here. That's all when it comes to mocking our API requests or using the handler. It requires some implementation, but at the end of the day, it's very rewarding. Another thing that we have to do in our core, which is let's get rid of something that we have talked about before, which is the resource helper class. We have seen this before, helper function that we're going to use in our network bound resource. Briefly, let's add here the file network bound resource. Basically what this function does, it's going to help us to handle caching and making, first of all, the API call, caching the data and return the data from the cache, basically. The last thing that we have to do here is the crypto. So we have to find a way to secure our API token. Create here a new package, crypto, create an interface, crypto service. Crypto service is going to have two functions, encrypt and decrypt. Let's implement now for production. I'm going to inject constructor. We're going to use Cypher. We have to get an instance transformation companion object. We're going to store here, for example, private transformation. So it will create a Cypher with this transformation. We need to initialize Cypher in encrypt mode with the key that we're going to define later on. Cypher init encrypt mode, get the secret key. Let's define this function to retrieve the secret key from Android key store, or to create one if it does not exist. It's going to give us secret key. First of all, I'm going to get the instance of Android key store. I'm not going to hard code this, so it's going to be private Android key store, simple as this. And here we're going to do get secret key. And we have to load the key store. No password is needed. I'm going to do key store and load, assign it to null. We have to get the existing key. In other words, we're going to return existing key or create a new one. Declare a new value. It's going to be called existing key. You have to do key store, get entry. So you have to define here an alias, private const. Let's call it auth key, for example. Now we have the existing key and we have to pass here null as key store secret. That's correct. And at the end, we will return if we have the existing key. Otherwise, we will create a new key. We're going to define here another method that's going to create for us a new key. Should give us in return a secret key. We need to get the instance of the key generator, and the provider is Android key store, key algorithms AES. We should use the same alias to retrieve the key later. Key gen parameter spec, and we have to call builder here. So here we have provided the same key aliases, and for the purposes, it's going to enable both encryptions and decryptions. We're going to use GCM block mode, provides integrity of data. Finally, no padding needed for GSM, and we're going to do build. Now we need to initiate the key generator, and we will return the key generator and generate the key. We have stopped here in the encrypt. So we have now initialized the cipher. So initialize cipher with encrypted or encrypt mode with the key. Let's create here, let's get the generated initialization vector. It's going to be random, and encrypted, it's going to be cipher and do final data to byte array. But here, instead of normal byte array, it has to be UTF. Basically, it's going to encrypt the input data. And we have to encode, I think it's version 4, and encrypted data to base 64 string. So we're not going to do this. Base 64. Make sure it's for the from util on Android. So base for base 64, it's a base 64 encoded to string and default, and we have to trim the value. Now let's return encrypted base 64 string. It's not return, it's going to be value encode to string. And the input, the encrypted base default and trim. So finally, we're going to return. So it's going to be base here, base 64. I have forgot to add here separator. I'm going to add here instead the separator and encrypted base 64. For the decrypt, the other way around, we need to split by the separator. Let's check if the size is not equal to different than 2. Going to return an empty string. In other words, it returns empty string if format is invalid. If the format is valid, we're going to decode base 64 encoded encrypted data. Now the encrypted value is going to be first one, base 64, which is correct. Create cipher with the no padding. We have to create specs. So GCM parameter specs requires tag length. So basically it's going to be 1 to 8. We need to initialize cipher in decrypt mode. Return cipher do final charset UTF-8. So basically it's going to decrypt and return the original string. That's about it for the service. Now we have to mock the service. Let's create here another package. It's going to be called mock. The test implementation for our crypto service for the encrypted, let's say just encrypted. And here I'm going to pass data. And for the decrypted, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to replace decrypted, or I have another idea. Remove prefix, way better. Gonna remove this prefix. So this is the mock implementation that's gonna be used in our testing. That's pretty much it for the core module. Now we have to define our dependency injection, creates an object, core data module. So first of all, let's annotate this with module, install in singleton component. So let's provide the coroutine dispatcher. So it's going to be dispatcher provider. And we have implemented this dispatcher provider, and we have done default dispatchers. The database, which is easier, gonna take application in parameter, gonna return PocketGood database. Database builder, pass application into arguments, PocketGood database class, Java. So database name, type converters, provide an instance of JSON, fallback, destructive migration to false, and finally build. Provide another dependency, which is the HTTP client. Create. We need to provide the API service, the engine, because we have shown here how to provide this engine. We have to provide here the implementation, or not the implementation, but we have just to pass an instance, the engine. Next, we have to provide the crypto service. It has to return the implementation. We have provided all the needed dependencies. I'm going to add here a debug flag for testing purposes. So qualifier and retention in binary, just in case we ever gonna need us. But the most important thing is we have provided the dependencies that we're gonna work with in all the modules. I'm gonna move this to API. So that's gonna wrap up our video. I think that we have covered everything in core module. We have done the API service, the crypto to protect our token, and we have defined DTOs, entities, database for caching, and all the mappers or the necessary mappers. If we forgot something, we're going to add this accordingly in the next video. Our core module is going to be used as a library, if you will, in the different modules. For example, authentication, products, and wishlist, as we have done in TypeScript. As you can see here, there are some similarities from the previous projects that we have done for the web version. And I think that we have covered pretty much everything here. For the next tutorial, we're going to build another reusable module. It's going to be for core UI. I hope you liked the video. See you in the next one, and happy coding.